Tuesday, 13 July 1943. Dear Kitty, yesterday afternoon, with Daddy's permission, I asked Dussel whether he would please be so good, being really very polite, as to allow me to use the little table in our room twice a week in the afternoons, from 4 o'clock till 5:30. I sit there every day from 2:30 till 4 while Dussel sleeps, but otherwise the room plus table are out of bounds. Inside, in our common room area, there is much too much going on. It is impossible to work there. And besides, Daddy likes to sit at the writing table and work too sometimes. So it was quite a reasonable request, and the question was put very politely. Now honestly, what do you think the very learned Dussel replied? No. Just plain no. I was indignant and refused to be put off like that, so I asked him the reason for his no. But I was sent away with a flea in my ear. This was the barrage which followed. I have to work too, and if I can't work in the afternoons, then there is no time left for me at all. I must finish my task, otherwise I've started it all for nothing. Anyway, you don't work seriously at anything. Your mythology, now just what kind of work is that? Knitting and reading are not work either. I am at the table and shall stay there. My reply was, Mr. Dussel, I do work seriously, and there is nowhere else for me to work in the afternoons. I beg of you to kindly reconsider my request. With these words, the offended Anne turned her back on the very learned doctor, ignoring him completely. I was seething with rage, and thought Dussel frightfully rude, which he certainly was, and myself very friendly. In the evening, when I could get a hold of Pym, I told him how it had gone off, and discussed what I should do next, because I was not going to give in, and preferred to clear it up myself. Pym told me how I ought to tackle the problem, but warned me that it would be better to leave it till the next day, as I was so het up. I let this advice go to the winds, and waited for Dussel after the dishes were done. Pym sat in the room next to us, which had a calming influence on me. I began, Mr. Dussel, I don't suppose you see any point in discussing the matter any more, but I must ask you to do so. Dussel then remarked with his sweetest smile, I am always and at all times prepared to discuss this matter, but it has already been settled. I went on talking, though continually interrupted by Dussel. When you first came here, we arranged that this room should be for both of us. If we were to divide it fairly, you would have the mornings and I all the afternoon. But I don't even ask that much, and I think that my 2 afternoons are really perfectly reasonable. At this, Dussel jumped up as if someone had struck a needle into him. You can't talk about your rights here at all. And where am I to go then? I shall ask Mr. Van Daan whether he will build a little compartment in the attic. Then I can go and sit there. I simply can't work anywhere. With you, one always gets trouble. If your sister Margot, who after all has more reason to ask such a thing, I should not think of refusing, but you. Then followed the business about the mythology and the knitting, and Anne was insulted again. However, she did not show it and let Dussel finish speaking. But you, one simply can't talk to you. You are so outrageously selfish. As long as you can get what you want, you don't mind pushing everyone else to one side. I've never seen such a child. But after all, I suppose I shall be obliged to give you your own way, because otherwise I shall be told later on that Anne Frank failed her exam because Mr. Dussel would not give up on the table for her. It went on, and finally it was such a torrent I could hardly keep pace with it. At one moment I thought, in a minute I'll give him such a smack in the face that he'll fly up to the ceiling together with his lies. But the next moment I said to myself, keep calm. Such a fellow isn't worth getting worked up about. After giving final vent to his fury, Master Dussel left the room with an expression of mixed wrath and triumph, his coat stuffed with food. I dashed to Daddy and told him all that he has not already heard of the story. Pym decided to talk to Dussel the same evening, which he did. They talked for over half an hour. The theme of the conversation was something like this. First of all, they talked about whether Anne should sit at the table, yes or no. Daddy said that he and Dussel had already discussed the subject once before, when he had professed to agree with Dussel, in order not to put him in the wrong in front of the young. But Daddy had not thought it fair then. Dussel thought that I should not speak as if he was an intruder who tried to monopolize everything. But Daddy stuck up for me firmly over that, because he had heard for himself that I had not breathed a word of such a thing. To and fro it went, Daddy defending my selfishness and my trifling work, Dussel grumbling continually. Finally, Dussel had to give in after all, and I had the opportunity of working undisturbed until 5 o'clock for 2 afternoons a week. Dussel looked down his nose very much, didn't speak to me for 2 days, and still had to go and sit at the table from 5 till half past. Frightfully childish. A person of 54 who is still so pedantic and small-minded must be so by nature, and will never improve. Yours, Anne.